How far is too far? How seriously are we allowed to take a game before we are called out for it? Now, as much as that is a very subjective question relative to who might or might not call us out, it is something that popped into my mind recently. For the first 4 seasons of competitive play, I was taking the game very seriously. My desire to improve and also my desire to want to win every match would often dictate not only my mood, but also the way I interacted with other individuals. And I mean, that's not surprising, is it? If something is important to us and we spend a lot of time with it, most people inevitably turn out to be influenced by that practice in one way or another. But is it inherently wrong for us to take Overwatch so seriously? This is what I want to discuss today. And before you hear about my thoughts regarding this topic, why not leave a comment with your own opinion? And if I manage to somehow influence the way you view this topic, just reply to your own comment so I can tell. If at all possible, I'd love to get a before and after kind of picture surrounding today's video. But enough stalling now, let's get right into it. When talking about some of our favorite pastimes, things change very rapidly once we enter a competitive environment. Practicing some kind of sport with your friends in your off time is a fun activity until you sign up for a club. In which case, frankly, I assume you would not do that if you didn't enjoy the sport, but you bring a more combat-ready sort of mentality to the table. Once it stops just being about us having fun in our pastime and our performances compared to other people, we usually start to react to it in a different way. Again, losing a friendly match of insert your favorite sport here is not a big deal when nothing is at stake and you don't feel naturally competitive about it. But the moment you enter an environment that strictly tries to further set competition, most people will start taking losses to heart. Now, there are a few reasons why a lot of gamers react very strongly to losses in video games. For one, much like in our real-life sport example, differentiating between casual and competitive environments can change everything. In that sense, there really isn't a reason to get overly upset in quick play because developers and players agreed that this is the environment specifically made for casual interaction. Much in that same way, if we willingly enter a competitive environment, then there's no excuse for us to not feel competitive about the practice. If you entered a football club, underperformed, and then tried to mock everyone around you about how they're taking it way too seriously, you'd be kicked out. It's as simple as that. The difference is that in real-life sport and in many video games actually, there's a barrier to entry that stops those of us who are not dedicated to the competition. They weed out the casuals ahead of time so it doesn't even get that far in the first place. If you don't put in the work to actually compete in that sport, then no club with any level of standard is ever going to accept you. But that barrier to entry does not exist in Overwatch. In fact, the game specifically creates different tiers of play that go so low that even players with no qualifications whatsoever can compete in the same environment as those who put in the hours and brain capacity to actually match the level of competition desired. Now, the reason all of this context matters to our discussion is because we need some kind of way to measure how seriously we can take any given activity. We need to set a bar to compare. Sure, relative to video games as a whole versus, let's say, an actual job, you might argue that there's no reason to take the game seriously. But if we do that, then the same thing applies for any sport that furthers competition outside of a professional level. It's a pastime. It's something that many decided to do for fun and some decide to compete in because that's how they enjoy it. Some people are drawn to competition more than others, and of course, we can be selective about that. If I felt competitive about playing football, then I could just be a competitively minded player that seeks the competition wherever he goes. Or I am satisfied with having my competitive itch taken care of by playing in a club, so I prefer to do everything else casually. Nobody can decide for you whether or not you are allowed to or supposed to take any pastime activity serious. The only thing we can fault you for is when you bring a competitive mindset into the wrong environment. Why put on your tryhard pants in a friendly match of ping pong with your buddies when nobody else is looking to challenge you? They're not gonna want to play with you when all you're after is sweating your dick off in what is supposed to be a casual pastime. In that same way, bringing a casual attitude into an inherently competitive environment is simply wrong. I don't care what you think about video games personally, because when you click the competitive play button, then you are supposed to adhere to the competition. And this is really where I believe a lot of the bad blood is coming from. Again, there's no barrier to entry, but there's also no repercussion for not adhering to the fundamentals of competitive play. In Overwatch, everything is relative. There is no coach that is going to kick us out for not trying our hardest. In fact, there's not even a bar to measure us against. Whether or not we are even trying is only decided by us and not by others, and this creates tension. We are having this discussion in the first place because of a number of reasons. For one, the mass appeal of Overwatch. It is not a strictly competitive game that makes it difficult for casual players to get into it in the first place. It is a very welcoming experience that allows players of all skill levels to enjoy it. If casual players are tricked into believing that they too can be competitive players without putting in the work and dedication, then we start to have a dispute that nobody can win. Because Overwatch is so inclusive, it can make players feel like absolute gods who might have never stood a chance in many other inherently competitive video games. And with the game itself never teaching us anything, not giving us a bar to measure ourselves against, and not providing any rule sets surrounding the competitive environment, we have a recipe for disaster at our hands. Nobody stops casual players from playing competitive, and if it even goes as far as to make casual players feel like they can be competitive players without putting in the work, then we are just constantly arguing over how the game is supposed to be played, what whoever is doing wrong, and whether or not somebody's taking it too seriously. Now, does taking competitive play seriously warrant us being assholes? No, of course it does not. Quite frankly, if you can't control your temper and lash out at your teammates for underperforming, then you are just making it that much more likely that nobody wants to listen to you, or even worse, try to prove you wrong. Yes, we have talked about it quite frequently in the past already. If all you care about is winning, then being a douchebag is counterproductive to your goal of winning the match. This is not a matter of catering to sensitive people, and only because something is true does not mean it has to be said. That is socializing 101, you should really give it a try. If you make your teammates hate your guts in a team-based game, then you are actively lowering your chances to win, and that in itself is a very anti-competitive attitude. With that said, we all have to accept what was laid out in front of us. After more than 2 years, it should be obvious that Blizzard is not interested in enforcing actual competition on ladder, and we have to roll with that. It's a sad state of affairs, I know, and I'm not saying that you are wrong for taking comp seriously, but one way or another, we all have to accept that casual players will be a part of rank play in Overwatch, and that some losses are simply inevitable. That's not to say that elo hell exists, and it's also not to say that this is the only problem playing competitive play. It's just the one thing I decided to focus on for today's video. Reading through the comments of my last video where I talked about incentives in video games and why they're so important, seeing people say, "We just play video games for fun," made me realize how many casual players this game attracted. And that's cool, I'm all for inclusion where it makes sense. But to see comments like that under a video that is actively trying to explain game mechanics to a casual audience is rather sad. If you find yourself playing Overwatch for extended periods of time, then trust me, that's not just because the game is fun. Game makers know how to exploit player behavior in a way that we rarely even notice it. And if you are interested in hearing more about that topic, feel free to check out that video. But this is me done for the day, so I talk about Overwatch and whether or not some players are taking it too seriously. Don't forget to add to your comment to let me know if I managed to change your mind at all. I'm looking forward to reading through them. But until then, thank you everybody so much for watching. Don't forget to drop me a like on your way out if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and I hope to see you all next time.